Hola, buenos días a todos y todas. Muchísimas gracias por estar con nosotros. El último día de nuestra conferencia, empezando hoy lo que sería nuestro último keynote speaker, que es la profesora Jessica Ringrose. So thank you. I'm gonna start now our last keynote speaker, Professor Jessica Ringrose. Thank you very much, Jessica, to have you here with us. It's amazing. And I'm also very honored to be moderating your presentation because Jessica has influenced a lot our work in Sexafin and the publications we're doing. So it's really an honor to have you here with us. And she'll be presenting participatory methodologies for researching young people's post-digital gendered identities, intimacies, and activism online and at school. Just for some of you that maybe don't know Professor Jessica Ringrose, she is a professor and co-director at the Center for Sociology of Education and Equity at UCL in London, UK. She is also a co-founder of Post-Digital Intimacies Research Network. She's a widely cited expert on teens and social media, youth activism, young people's gendered and sexual cultures, sex education, and digital literacies in school settings. She has also worked with a wide range of global and UK stakeholders to shape policy and practice in areas of education, gender, media, communication, and justice. Her research projects focus on developing educational interventions to prevent tech-facilitated gender-based and sexual violence and the impact of smartphones and social media bans upon youth. In 2020, she was the recipient of the American Educational Research Association Distinguished Contributions to Gender Equity in Education Award. So thank you very much, Jessica, for being here today. And just to remind you that you have about 1 hour of presentation. And after that, we'll have about 30 minutes of discussion and the Q&A session. And then again, thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Zenaida, and also to Sexafin for this incredible opportunity and the invitation. It's my real privilege and honor to be here with you. So just for the audience, I can't see you because I can only see my screen because of the way that my viewing is set up here on my monitor. So Zenaida, if you just jump in, if something's gone awry or somebody needs something, and tell me, and I will stop. My presentation style is to kind of like love bomb you with slides. I have a lot of slides, a lot of content. So I hope that it works with the translation because obviously I can't hear the translation. But also just like, of course, interactively jump in if something is not clear or if I am talking like way too fast, which could indeed be the case. So yeah, I work in London. I'm coming to you from my home just outside of London. And but I'm actually Canadian. You can hear it in my accent, perhaps. This is me recently at the Canadian Embassy. I've been helping them with gender equity here in London. It's a huge privilege for me. So I've worked in England for 22 years. I've had my whole career, my whole academic career here. But I did my doctorate in Toronto at York University. So I really feel a close connection to Canada and North America as well. But I consider myself to be like a public intellectual. I really try to work with NGOs and grassroots and activists to really try to create social change. I'm so privileged to work at UCL. It's one of the top 10 universities in the world, and it provides a really brilliant platform to communicate and work on these impactful social issues. This is again just me going around doing stuff on protests. This is my colleague EJ Reynolds, who Divya, who's listening, knows well. And just over the years, different things that I have done, getting out into the public domain and trying to make feminist change. And with my doctoral students, I run the Feminist Educational Engagement Lab at UCL, and I really just want to pay a tribute to my students. I do all my thinking with them, and yeah, I think one of my students actually might be listening as well. And thank you to all of the ideas. And work that we do together. I have a lot of collaborators. It's the key to feminist success. And I do a lot of work trying to promote my research, to policymakers and change makers. And here's just a brief selection, and some of the people that I've collaborated with recently, who will probably also come up in some of the methodologies I'm going to discuss. And I also really try to do accessible, resources that can reach a wide public, including having our stuff put up on UNESCO, which is wonderful when you get some kind of global recognition from the work that you're doing on the ground around sex education or tech-facilitated violence, etc. And I also try to do a lot of like public awareness through, accessible thought pieces. And here's some ones that I've done in the last year or two, to try and address issues like misogyny or transphobia or, tech facilitated gender-based abuse. So today I'm going to be talking about, and it really follows on from some stuff that Divya was saying around the big tech companies. What in the moment that we are in with technology? I'm going to go a bit broader than just sex and gender because these are, critical moments that we're in right now in terms of like the tech revolutions that we're seeing and how do we approach this as gender and sexuality scholars, and I'm going to talk a lot today about methodologies and pedagogies, and my evolving research approach. So I'm going to try to get through a lot, which is to try almost take you through my career of looking at this and how my methods have changed and what I think we need to be looking at now to address some of the current pressing problems. And just this has been a thread all the way through the conference is taking children's rights and agency very seriously. And what is integral to my research is the ethical in interaction with young people and taking their voice and agency very seriously as a part of how we aim to create social change. And just really thinking about what's the point of our research and how do we do our research and how do we get people to listen to our research? What are the best, oops, sorry, I think that might be my email on, apologies. Um, and how do we actually do research that people will listen to? I mean, we're flooded with information, disinformation, statistics. And so myself and many colleagues have found that visual representations, arts-based methods are becoming extremely important ways to communicate to the public what we're trying to transmit about what we need to see in terms of gender change, cultural change, etc. So I'll go all through that as I proceed. So the current moment, we're not going to be surprised. It's all about the tech bros, big tech, Trump in partnership with all of these huge billionaires, gazillionaires, and all of the controversy and harm that that has created all over the world, and people are struggling. How do we overcome Trumpism? And it was wonderful to see the mayor of New York City break through this, a thread of hope for us in for democracy in the world. But it's really alarming because if you see how Trump himself is using technology in such dismissive ways, and I know that the audio isn't very good in this because we tried it, but this was um, a video that Trump released. The last time I gave this talk, I was in Lima a few weeks ago, and this came out the morning I was giving the talk. So, yeah, unbeknownst to anyone why he did it, he released a video of Obama in prison. It's like, actually, you're the one that should be in prison, but it's just the willful use of AI technology and disinformation from the president of America. It's just really quite bewildering. And where does this leave us in terms of technology? This is your actual PM Sanchez saying tech billionaires want to overthrow democracy with social media. And I think that the Italian prime minister, who's recently, you'll be aware, restricted sex education because she's like a far right woman. Basically, we're not seeing the ability of nation states to intervene into this tech bro situation. And this presents a lot of issues for us. If we can't rely on the state and we can't rely on regulation, where does this leave us in terms of struggling with these issues? And it's something I'm grappling with, and I don't have any answers. I'm bringing it to the table because I think we have to go beyond some of the conversations that we're having to think about how grassroots resistance could really play a part. Oh, and this is just like if they would all just like get blown up into space on one of Elon Musk's rockets. It's a little light entertainment relief in the middle of this. Usually people are chuckling, so I'm imagining in my head that you are. So yeah, what are the main problems then that we're facing in relation to tech, gender, and power? It's not been a surprise. We've seen some of this already through the conference that there's a lot of panic over social media, over algorithms, scrolling ourselves stupid, that algorithms are designed to push distracting and harmful content, disinformation, polarization, radicalization, the manosphere, misogyny, the far right. And we're seeing this retraditionalization of gender identities. So we have here the really influential British Netflix series Adolescence, which aired earlier this year and caused a huge media furor because, well, actually, the Prime Minister of England thought it was an actual documentary and made a news release. I mean, and then his whole bright idea was to make everyone, all the school children in England, watch this show, which obviously, from a feminist perspective, is ridiculous because you don't I can't even get into it. I think you could see that showing children this content would be completely ethically irresponsible. And then we have a trad wife here. So the kind of like opposite side of how femininity is being retraditionalized. And so there's a lot of panic and anxiety over these issues. There's a constant discourse about whether platforms can be made safe. Can we implement new systems? How will this actually work though? Because I'm just going to skip forward and then skip back. Age verification is a really problematic response to these issues. And I did see one of the speakers advocate for age verification, but it actually can end up harming democracy if we enable the state to be using our identification every time we log on and off. We have to be very, very concerned about how both the government and tech companies are using our information. So age verification isn't necessarily the solution that it's been being proffered. We have to just be very careful about how regulation works. There's obviously, we've heard loads in this conference about porn and panics over porn, and really that panics over porn are not helpful. This was a conservative member of parliament from England who actually personally attacked me and actually included me and completely ripped apart my research in a report that was against sex education. And she had these ridiculous types of headlines that porn is inspiring kids to become trans, like just absurdities. It's not to say that obviously there are not problems to do with porn, but as we've seen in quite a few interesting presentations in this conference, we have to treat young people as agentic users and to increase, the porn literacy um, that we have. We need porn literacy. We need to be having discussions, sex education discussions about this. There's the Italian PM who has moved to restrict sex education. I think it was just last week. And the Tories in our country in England did the same thing. And then there was a new government that came in, but they didn't take back everything that the Conservative Party had done. And in fact, they kept the elements of transphobia. So even though we're supposed to have a Labour and quasi-democratic government, they are completely promoting transphobic policies. So we're facing this kind of rise of neoconservatism and far right ideas as we've been seeing in this conference globally, and it's very concerning, very worrying. But the reality is, systematic reviews of research shows that um, the preventative measures of sex and health education at schools is the number one thing that's going to actually prevent the harm. And if there are which harms there are of pornography, especially violent pornography, which of course there are problems about. I'm going to actually say a little bit more about that in a moment. But another panic we are seeing, which I'm becoming increasingly interested in, is AI. You're seeing all sorts of narratives. It's de-skilling the population. There's cognitive offloading. All the content it's created is slop or brain rot. And it's creating new avenues for harm, isolation, dependency, and deep fakes and all sorts of issues. I actually just went on to BBC Radio on Tuesday to talk about teenage boys in AI because apparently, because of the crisis of masculinity and loneliness and isolation, one third of the boys in this research that was done, it wasn't very good research actually. I hope the person's not watching, but it wasn't like academically vetted research. It was just a charity, and they didn't do a very good research design. But anyway, they found that one third of the teen boys um, were turning to AI girlfriends and chatbots and companions. So that is something that we really need to keep our eye on. How do we go about regulating them? Character AI has just, I don't seem to have a slide on that, but character AI is now going to have, you can't use it if you're under 18 because people are recognizing that just came out this week. I mean, there's just news headlines continuously on these issues. But just the last week, I just got a new research project. I'm so excited about it to look at this very topic on adolescence chatbots, AI intimacies, and how we can create some literacies through things like mindfulness and different strategies to counter AI dependency. Because I believe that these AI interactions are really reconfiguring subjectivity as we know it in our world. And we just like any other tech panic, we need to be equipped and we need to give young people, well, all people, resources for coping and managing with this, and not just sort of throwing our hands up in panic and saying we're going to ban AI, because it's just not going to happen. So yeah, there's a range of harms related to AI, disinformation. There's these very specific tech facilitated harms. The emergence of deep fakes. I've been looking at this with a colleague, Tanya Horick. Um, and the report that came out earlier this year in England was that only 11% of children have ever been taught about deepfakes in school. And interestingly, teenagers see new deepfakes abuse as worse than sexual abuse featuring real images. Sorry again, I can't go off of here to turn off my email, so hopefully we don't hear too many more. Um, why are the teenagers finding this worse? Because of the lack of autonomy and awareness of the image, anonymity of the perpetrator, the ways in which the image may be manipulated to make the victim appear, and fears that family members, teachers, or peers might believe the image is real. That's really interesting that that's what young people were reporting in this particular research from Internet Matters. Okay, so one of my greatest worries as a researcher in gender and sexuality is I do a lot of research that does uncover harms, and then the response tends to be panics, tech panics. And we had a conversation about tech panics and whether they were good or bad in the earlier keynote today. And I actually believe any kind of panic is really counterproductive because it whips up anxiety and it tends to try to search for a quick fix, some kind of like gimmick to try and like solve these issues, right? Oh my God, smartphones are addictive. Technology has to be restricted and banned. It gears itself towards abstinence approaches, which we know from our field of research in sexuality education doesn't work. So I'm very skeptical about these kinds of like, pop psychology books, but they've had a massive influence. I mean, Jonathan Haidt has had a massive influence, for example, on the Australian context where they're going to ban social media for all under 16s, as we heard with from Kath Albury. And Jonathan Haidt was actually directly advising their government because some politician's wife read the book. And this is how people gain influence, and these types of solutions get generated, which we know won't work. So what is the issues? How we have to keep privacy in mind, as I've been saying. It's very complex, and we need to work at multiple levels. One of the things I'm extremely interested in right now is the kind of like banning idea, right? And it's just being mobilized everywhere. So there's no phones in Spanish classrooms either. I was just like I said, I was in South America and in Brazil, no phone, Peru, England. It's everywhere. In fact, one of the only outliers is Singapore, who is taking a kind of like tech-friendly approach, but I think it's even like being criticized. There's critics that are trying to push for banning there. We can't take a simplistic gimmick type approach. We can't treat social media as just some kind of substance or, becoming turning ourselves off screens. Um, it's not going to work. We need to have more sort of complex, and I would say educational strategies. Like I was saying, age verification can open up a lot of problems. Like down here, this picture right here is a child opening a tablet, and this is supposed to have facial recognition that guesses how old you are. And you can just imagine the kind of like data and privacy nightmares if we have to have facial recognition or fingertip recognition or sign in with our government ID every time we use the internet. I mean, really, it's a dystopic horror show. And so we just have to try to find solutions that maybe also balance privacy and data protection. Yeah, we're living in an age of capitalist, platform capitalism and intellectual monopolies over information through those major tech bros. We're living in an age of a smartphone attention economy, which we need to really grapple with. Some people in education are talking about digital degrowth. Maybe there's some ways that we could consider um, disengagement, but I think it really needs to be carefully considered because the approaches right now are really kind of like sledgehammer bans. And my whole point is that we need digital literacy instead of banning. I follow on from Sonia Livingston and Amanda Third, who like almost a decade ago were talking about how blocking and reducing isn't going to present as a solution, and we just need much better digital literacy, media literacy, and in the British context, we've had a lot of reports showing that our media and digital literacy is completely inadequate. It's not up to speed. It isn't even covering AI. Young people just are not being taught what they need to stay safe and be well online. And we've heard a lot already through this conference as well as how the laws are also lagging behind. So it's quite a problematic situation. I talk about how we need better algorithmic and AI media literacies to address these gaps. Like, how do these algorithms on social media work? What's the business model? How children are very adept at understanding things like money and like the value, and they can understand business like that their attention's being monetized actually if you have conversations with them. So these types of conversations are really critically important as a baseline. Yeah, and just a few things about how I've been conceptualizing these before I move into the more exciting part, which is sharing my data with you. So these are all things that have been very influential for me, thinking about how we are datafied, thinking about how algorithms are subjectifying and oppressing us, and reconfiguring our identities, how we're living in networked publics, and our affects are completely networked, um, and that we are in platform economies, which sort of structure how we interact in the world. And we are, yeah, in these kind of like platformed intimacy economies. So the way that I've been approaching this is through this concept I've been using for a while called the post-digital. People don't like the post because they don't like posts in general, like postmodern or post-human, but I love it. It's not to say that it's not digital anymore. It's just that there's no not digital anymore. It's a concept to refer to how the online and the offline are entangled, and effective and material like entanglements. So we really can't say that there's any kind of experience now that's not mediated via the digital. And that's what this post-digital concept's trying to grasp. Like, it's not like some people are digital natives and some people aren't. Like every element of life now is pretty much mediated through digital technologies. And I've been writing about this with Adrian Evans. We recently published an article called More Than Human, More Than Digital, Post-Digital Intimacies as a Theoretical Framework. And we also have a new book coming out on post-digital intimacies. It's an edited book, which looks at how a lot of different people are theorizing the post-digital in relation to different research contexts. So that's coming out next year, which is really exciting. And I've been theorizing and thinking about this for quite a long time, using like Deleuzian theory and new materialism and affect to try and think about these entanglements and these new types of relationalities that are constructed vis-a-vis digital technology. So yeah, it addresses this false binary between digital and the real, and I think this is really important in relation to like policymakers tend to divide like online and offline, and they'll have like a digital strategy or like tech facilitated. Whereas I think it's really important that we kind of grapple with the fact that, especially for young people, there's no real offline without the online. They're just completely intermeshed. And we really need to get to grips with that if we want to try to support young people in their everyday lives. Oh, this was us during the pandemic. We had this post-digital intimacies, and like I am right now, we were all online talking about these issues. This is the book that's coming out, I already mentioned, so please look out for it. Um, and like we're seeing some new stuff come out as well about artificial intimacies. You know, I think that's quite an interesting term. Turkle's using it now. What does it mean when we are going to be interacting with Gen AI? And one of the things I think conceptually is interesting is that we're moving from like in the previous decade, we were kind of really excited about digital technology and its potentiality and being networked selves. And, especially I was studying digital activism and how we could all activate and, use Twitter. Well, Trump destroyed Twitter. Elon Musk destroyed Twitter. And I feel like now we truly are moving into a very passive, algorithmicized self, so that we are mostly viewing content unless we're an influencer ourselves. Very few of us are. I was just in a big conference in South America, and like I think one person in the audience was like considered themselves to have like, be an influencer. And most people aren't producing content. Most people are actually even stopping posting because it's like, what's the point in this kind of media, so in this kind of like ecosystem that we're in now? So we see this kind of like passivity coming up, which is something we have to grapple with in terms of how does that impact young people in their engagement with social media and AI. And I'm really interested in developing post-digital methodologies and particularly like how the actual platforms work, like from the user's perspective and how they impact how the user can engage with the technology, with others, with themselves. I take a lot of this thinking from people like Dana Boyd, who originally, way back in 2011, talked about the four affordances of persistence, visibility, spreadability, and searchability, which was created through social media networks. But there's a lot of other affordances which come up depending on the platforms in use. Yeah, and I think that this is really lends itself to thinking about how, sorry again for the email, how we educate. And I think we need post-digital pedagogies as well. Okay, so just take a tiny break here. That was the first part, which I managed to get through in half my time, so that's great. And now I would like to go through my evolving research approaches and how I've looked at these issues over time. Some of it I'm going to have to go through pretty quickly because I want to get to my most up-to-date research, which I just carried out this summer, which I'm super excited about to share with you. So let's get going. In the 2000s, digital ethnography was huge. It became like a big way that we would study what was going on online. So it just replicated ethnographic methodologies, but online in the digital sphere. So we saw the rise of digital ethnography, online and internet ethnography, netnography, social media ethnography. All of these were devised for trying to find out what was going on in online spaces. Dana Boyd is a huge figure who did one of the earliest ethnographies of teens' online life. Um, she looked at social networking sites as networked publics. She started hanging out in online spaces with young people to observe digital dynamics and then connecting with teens through the sites and interviewing them. And these methods allowed her to delve into why youth heart or love social networking sites, showing how the networked publics that young people generated in these early years were between peers that knew each other online and offline. And that was a really important point. She said that although teens theoretically have the ability to behave differently online, the social hierarchies that regulate coolness offline are also present online. And another person I really admire from this period is Susanna Stern, and she was a proponent of going beyond online observations to having discussions with the youth producers, as she called them, about how they were creating their social media identities. So I actually did my first social media ethnography way back in 2008. So it's almost getting into like 20 years ago, which makes me feel really old. And I was studying this platform called Bebo, which was all about share the real you. And I've recently done like nobody remembers this platform, but it was like a kind of like a version of MySpace, and you would create a platform. These are actually some of the pictures from the young people, and I love it that these sparkles still work all these years later. And I was looking at their landing pages and how they represented themselves in terms of masculinity and femininity. So this was Daniela, and she had this, I've taken out all of her personal images, but she had this very sexualized tagline about herself and these statements. And so I interviewed Daniela and her peers in the school site, asked if it was okay if I could the researchers could view some of her material online, and then we went back. And this is what she said. I didn't know what you would think because my username is slut, but I don't mean it as I'm a slut. If you look down my friends list, one of her usernames is whore, and we just have this little thing. She's my slut, I'm her whore, because loads of people used to call us it. So we just thought, whatever, we'll just be them then. And one day we found a background and we were like, that's nice. I didn't know if you would read it. She's speaking to me as the interviewer and be thinking, oh my God. And so I said, so you mean people used to say you were a slut? And she said, yeah, some people, older girls saw us with someone and they could be like, you're a slag. That's the British version of slut. You're a slut. Just because they didn't know us and they want to insult us, because we used to really care about it. And then we got a bit like, I don't care. We got used to it. And then I don't know what happened. It was a random thing where we're like, she's my whore. I'm her slut. Whatever. Get over it. So I found this is a very salient piece of data. It stands out to me even almost 20 years later because if I was just like a person looking on her social media site and I thought, oh my God, she's hypersexualizing herself, but actually she's doing this statement of herself as a slut as a form of feminist, quasi at this time perhaps feminist or resistance. Like she's not articulating herself as a feminist, but she's definitely resisting slut shaming by calling herself a slut. So I think this is a really interesting example, and this is the kind of data that you can generate when you're with young people in real life. You have a rapport with them, and you get them to talk to you about what they're representing, rather than just like doing content analysis and seeing what happens online. This is why I'm a very strong advocate of actually interacting with young people and finding out what they think, what their opinion is, and learning from them rather than just making assumptions about them. So I wrote a whole bunch about this, digital sexual subjectivities, identities, performances, and what was going on for them, mostly focusing on femininities at this stage of my career. And then in 2011, I undertook a second online ethnography, which also involved interviewing in school sites, on sexting, which was a kind of a newly emerging word at the time. And we did the very first study of sexting in England. And it was fascinating, and we found loads of different things. We were studying how young people were using BlackBerry. I don't know if anyone remembers BlackBerry, but it's like a bygone technology. Businessmen were using it, but also the teens, and it created a non-surveillable network. So it was very interesting because they could send all sorts of things, and no one was monitoring it whatsoever. But we also did the same strategy, and we looked at their Facebook profiles, the types of things that the texts they were sending one another, and how they would now had the capacity to screen capture as evidence things that had been said. So if you think that wasn't possible previous to this era, and then how, evidence can be used to shame or to abuse people. So that was something that was coming out of this study. This is something that was on a 15-year-old boy's Facebook page, which we found really interesting. What does this mean to say that, you own my boobs? I've actually written a whole paper about this. In this case, Dante was actually really embarrassed that this person had posted this on his page. So I think it's really important not to assume that boys just across the board like are enjoying this kind of visibility. Because not all boys are participating in like harmful versions of masculinity, but it was difficult for them to resist this because of homosocial rewards, like what you would say in the Spanish context of machismo, or we call in the British context ladism, or like bro culture in North America, right? So I was with some of the 15-year-old boys, and I was saying, like, well, what if you tried to challenge this practice of like sharing images of girls' bodies? And Jason said, if they had a picture of a girl naked and you told them that's wrong, they will think straight away you are gay. So that's something we hear over and over and over again. And CJ Pascoe in America has done a lot of important work looking at how these homosocial stigmatizations work in terms of like policing masculinity, in terms of policing heteronormative masculinity. Like if you don't buy into these coercive, predatory, abusive practices, then you're gay. Yeah, so this is just something that I found then and I found since, but this was way back in 2012 from this data. So we took a very psychological perspective on this, and we talked about how technology acted as a new conduit for gendered power imbalances. Um, and we wrote about their sexual cultures, and how they were yeah, doing their sexuality online. But after this study, I really started to become aware of some of the limitations of doing these digital ethnographies and of capturing young people's images and their online participation, like in a surveillant way instead of a participatory way. We started to see quite a lot of critiques of digital ethnography and its intrusive and surveillant tendencies and the particular risks associated with viewing children's online content, because actually I was shown things that were illegal. And this continues to happen. And it's sort of like a very tricky area to negotiate if children's nude images under 18 years for digital images are considered are illegal. Well, what do we do? How do we get around this so that we don't not talk to children and young people about these issues, because that's obviously hugely important, but how do we actually do research that is ethically safe for both the researchers and the participants? This is something I've been grappling with for very many years, coming out of these early studies. And I really, I guess, towards about 20, right after this study, 2013, 14, 15, I really started to move into like this idea of co-production and the fact that we actually need to be working with children and young people and figuring out what they want to share and how can we find strategies to do that. And that's really motivated my research for the past 10 years. I've done a lot of work with E.J. Ranald, working on creative and participatory methods using art to depict their experiences. And I've particularly honed in to try to use these techniques with digital media. This is a project that, for example, I did on gender and advertising, finding ways that young people can kind of explain their experiences and also resist some of the issues that they're experiencing. So I have a whole section of work that happened 2015, 16, 17, where I was studying feminist activism against rape culture. And a book here came out in 2018, Digital Feminist Activism, co-authored with Caitlin Mendes and Jocelyn Culler. And my part of